Yeah, so.
No.
All right, so I had the option to leave the meeting just now. You are now being recorded. Do you want to leave? All right. So yeah, like to reiterate what David said, this meeting is very valuable to the design, and we're trying to get a lot out and a lot of decisions hopefully made from this meeting. And so we're going to try to get through as much as we can. But before we get into what we have and what we need answers on, I think it's very valuable that we review what has been established in the first round of this design, which was the master planning. And the master planning, the town of Woodfin and the consultants had a steering advisory committee of which the town was a part of. And there were many, many months spent on this master plan, and the outcomes for the vision and the goals are what you're seeing here on this presentation. And I think it's very important. So I'm just going to read it word for word because I think the vision and the goals, as concise as they are very valuable. And so the vision, as presented in the master plan and by the steering advisory committee, is that the town of Woodfin, as it continues to grow and expand, the Woodfin Wave and the Riverside Park will be Western North Carolina's premier urban whitewater destination and riverfront park. The park will be a central node on the Woodfin Greenway and Blueway that shapes community character and celebrates the community's diverse needs. It will be a safe place to play, gather, contemplate, and recreate. And I think it's important to know, like this, the sublines to this vision is that this park is a Woodfin park, but it's also going to be designed to be a regional park because of its size and the nature of the amenities in it. It's going to attract people from not only all over Buncombe County, but people throughout the nation who are enthusiasts and even internationally, as we've been told. So the three main goals for the park, and these were all presented to in the public survey as you guys have reviewed the raw data from, is to become a premier urban whitewater and blueway destination, right? So creating a destination that has this whitewater feature. 2, to connect the park as a hub for the Woodfin Greenway and the surrounding community, right? So this is a central node, and it's going to, one of the main goals is connection and accessibility. And then the third is to provide a welcoming and safe place for a diversity of users. So the idea is that this park is not just for wave goers, but for all of the residents and all the regional users, changing abilities, different age groups, etc. And so we want to create a space that welcomes them, reduces barriers to interaction and accessibility.
Are there any questions on the vision and goals? All right, we'll move forward.
All right, so we're going to briefly go through the master plan as is, because hopefully you guys have seen it a number of times now. But basically, you can see here that we're expanding Riverside Park, right? And we have a large number of amenities in the master plan that captures this idea that the wave is a piece of it, but the park as a whole is activated in many different ways, that it's flexible in use and that it's accessible and is part of the larger connection. Next slide. So the first phase, as done in the master plan, next slide. And hit enter again. You can see the highlighted items there, and we'll get into more detail on these. But what happened was we were presented with a budget. So after the master plan was done, we were asked to include a prioritization portion in the master plan. So the town had presented Equinox with a budget, and the steering advisory committee, the town and Equinox sat down and prioritized based on the budget the items that it would like to include in the first phase. Now we're presenting this to you because I think phasing will be a part of the discussion that we want this committee to be a part of now that this committee has been formed. Next slide. The key features, so really the main elements that were kind of a must to include in the first phase and what was included in the first phase in the master plan is, of course, the parking, the large pavilion, so a place for viewing and shelter, the plaza itself, so the entry plaza, so that's that upper receiving area. D there is the stairs and access down to the lower portion. As you recall, that lower portion is about 12 foot lower than the upper portion. And this cut is necessary to receive floodwaters and to allow access down to the wave. And then E and F are basically, the E is that lower plaza area, the viewing, the spectating, the area immediately offshore or onshore from the wave, and then F is the wave itself. There are some other features, like we were making some improvements to the existing park that aren't noted on here, and those are mostly grading issues to make sure that the park doesn't pond water on its paths, and some vegetative issues. And if you go to the next slide. One of the main aspects or important goals of the park was its ecological improvements. Now, this is necessary not only from a permitting standpoint, but also as part of the grant that was received, the $200,000 grant that was received. So this is, and as you'll see later, this is actually very important to the public as a whole as well. This is one of their main focuses. And so you can see here, this is just also first phase elements focusing on ecological improvements. So it's a pollinator garden, that's riverside stabilization and riparian enhancements, as well as stormwater features.
So we're going to turn it over to Riley and Dane to talk about the wave.
Okay, yeah. So basically, once we get the final new survey, we'll start actually creating a geometry for these for the wave feature. But in general, just to go through how we're going to design it, we will target a flow range somewhere between 2,000 and 3,500 CFS in the river. And what we'll do is we'll design the wave feature with the geometry such that it channelizes the water as the water levels drop and rise. And so hopefully you can see where I'm drawing here. This middle section is where the lowest elevation ramp will be, and the idea is at lowest flows the water goes right through there and through the fish bypass, and then at medium flows it goes through a higher notch, and then at high flows it fills in the entire width. And to illustrate this a little bit better, if you want to go ahead and switch to the next slide. Yeah, see, so this gives you a little bit better idea. This is a project that we did in Eagle, Colorado, and this lowest notch here is low flow. So we'll send the lowest flows, 2,000 CFS, will go through this lower notch, and obviously it'll fill in the rest of this as well. But the idea is to make most of the water flow through the center so that the wave is good for as long as possible. Even at low flows, we're going to concentrate that flow and create a good wave through there. The photo on the right shows low flow at Eagle after construction. And you can see we've done grouted boulder construction, and you can see that the water at the lowest flow, this is only about 100 CFS, is flowing through that middle notch. And then as the water rises, it spreads out to here. And we'll come up with this geometry using CAD and a few other tools. The final survey will help us model everything and make sure that the hydraulic properties, the hydraulic characteristics are what we're looking for in the wave. And then if you want to go ahead to the next slide. Perfect. And I apologize, I'm kind of zipping through this because I know we're on a time crunch. This shows you on the left side what the Eagle River looked like before, and then this on the right side is the final wave. And this is at a little bit higher flows, and you can see the entire boulder ramp is covered, and the water's going over all the flow notches, and it makes a nice glassy breaking wave for a whole bunch of different users.
And Riley, can you expect, and excuse me if you don't know the answer to this right now, but can you expect that the wave at this park could be of similar height as the wave that we're picturing on the right there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the wave you see on the right-hand side is in the Eagle River. The flow in this photo is the low end of the target zone that we're going for in Asheville. So at Woodfin. So
Great. And would you describe that wave as a surfing wave? That we have received a lot of comments in the public comment about wanting a surfing wave.
yeah. So the multi-flow design that we do, it's going to vary depending on the water levels. So at lower levels, it may be better for kayaking, and at higher levels, it'll be better for surfing. But it'll go through phases where it will break and create a better kayaking wave or surfing wave, or it'll glass out and be a better sup wave or river surfing wave. So, and at low flows, it'll be good for tubing, and so it'll cover a lot of bases.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so we want to go ahead and move into the summary of the survey. I know that you all received preliminary raw data, but we went ahead and went through all the data after we closed the survey on Monday and summarized it. We want to go through that now. We went ahead and we broke the data out. We thought this committee would like to see the data broken out by Woodfin residents and then all other survey respondents. For one, because this is a Woodfin park, but in addition, we're also viewing it as a regional park. So viewing it from both perspectives, we thought you might appreciate, where we notice similarities and where we might notice differences. You can see here the top amenity choices. So we offered a variety of choices. It's kind of hard to see what all the options are, but it's like a ADA fishing ramp, small picnic shelter. These are all the items from the main master plan. The natural play area, the pump track, the habitat restoration, play slope, the river access, the stage, restrooms, large pavilion, and greenway. And I listed all the ones that had at least 5% of respondents chose as their, again, we're looking at their top amenity choice right now, not the accumulation of their total amenity choices, but just their top choice. So at least 5% of people pick these items as their top choice. But overwhelmingly, you can see in the pie charts there, anywhere from 37% to 45%, if you look depending on the residency, chose the Greenway as their #1 amenity. And time again, when we do these surveys, we've done this one, we've done other events, and just various places we're hearing from the public, the Greenway is very, very important to them. And so we do have the Greenway as part of a different project. So setting that aside, what are the other aspects of the park? Restrooms, very important. The large pavilion, very important. And then from there, it starts to taper off a bit, but habitat restoration and then play. And so we'll get into it a little more later, but play, even though it's lower on here as the #1 choice, it is factoring into a lot of people's just when they're thinking about this park and what are they going to do when their families come to watch? What are their kids going to be doing? Go ahead and go to the next slide. So you can see here what we did is we combined all their choices. So the top 4 choices of what we gave them. We gave them 4 choices here. So you have Woodfin residents, which had 262 responses, and then residents outside of Woodfin, we had 389 responses. And again, this is difficult to see, but in Woodfin and in the residents outside of Woodfin, the responses were pretty much very similar. Restrooms, pavilion, greenway, and habitat restoration, and then river access and natural play kind of fall closer to the bottom. And as you can see, there are some elements that may be surprising, depending on who you are, that didn't quite make the cut of 25% of the respondents putting in their top 4, like the fishing, the pump track, the train platform, and the boat ramp. And so these are elements that are all in the master plan, but we're ranked lower. So could be considered when thinking about public input and phasing. This was also very fascinating to us. So we presented the public with all the goals that we came up with in the master plan, and we presented those goals and asked the public to weigh in on, I think they were allowed to pick up to 3 options. Which of those goals rang most to them? Which ones of those that they connect with the most? And about half of respondents chose accessibility, connectivity, welcomingness of the park, and provide a diversity of uses, and ecological focus and habitat restoration. You can note here that the goal of becoming a premier whitewater destination didn't rank as high as those. And then the idea that the master plan presented the idea that the park was telling an ecological story, a historical story, and that ranked the lowest. And we feel that the park can tell that story independently of any additional costs per se, except if we want to start adding in some additional features like signage and whatnot. And then lastly, we asked for open response. And I broke this out again by Woodfin residents and those outside of Woodfin, so we can kind of see the difference. The items at the top and larger received the most number of respondents for saying these things, and these were broken into themes. Woodfin residents strongly were speaking about access. If we're putting this park there, they want to make sure that they can get to this park. And if it's near them, like the Riverside Walk, I believe is in the neighborhood across from the park. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
It's Riverwalk.
Riverside Walk?
Riverwalk.
Riverwalk. Thank
Yeah.
you, Riverwalk. Yeah, there were several residents from Riverwalk that were nervous about crossing the busy road. So there was several comments about signalizing the intersection, having sidewalks along Riverside Drive, or other crosswalks or ways to access the park. We are providing a greenway in the master plan. We are providing blueway in the master plan, and possibly rail line. But pedestrian access was very high on Woodfin residents' list. And then the second most commented on thing was keeping the park peaceful. A lot of the Woodfin residents commented on the fact that they currently enjoy the park as a peaceful place to go and just kind of contemplate. And they don't want the park to become a theme park. And they're worried about impacts and just the larger impact of having more people coming in, so traffic and noise. And then beyond that, it's having more land activities. So can we have play? Can we have exercise? Like using body weight type stuff like pull-up bars, or like, those little platforms that people can step up on, and bird watching, having grills to be able to utilize, some smaller items, but being able to have other things besides the wave to be able to enjoy the park. And then there was concern about water quality. And then having, you can see at the bottom there, it's really hard to see, but I'll just list them off. Have the wave have multiple skill levels, have clean restrooms. People see the restrooms as leading to like the comfort feeling. They, feel comfortable at a park. They want restrooms. And then more parking was a comment, accommodating flooding, and, general like of the amenities. And by contrast, if you go to the next slide, you can see outside of Woodfin, the overwhelming feeling was that of being super excited about this park coming. And the park, wanting the park to be for multiple ages. So my impression is that people coming from outside of Woodfin are going to drive, they're going to make the drive over. So they're going to bring their families. It's not just going to be a casual walk across the street. And so they want to have play features for the kids, play beach, as you might have seen in the other wave parks, like the one at Durango, climbing features. The pump track was part of the master plan that was mentioned a couple times in the free response. And then of course, connectivity. The idea of the greenway kept coming up even in the free response, even though they were able to comment on that early on. And then accessibility, protecting the environment was repeated again. And then restrooms, you can see common themes here. So when we get down below the top elements, the themes become very, very common. It says no theme park is here as well, but you can see kind of like they're reversed, like the prioritization of that is reversed a little bit. So the overall gist, our kind of summary of what we were reading in looking at all the responses and coming out with themes is the gist of what everyone wanted, no matter what their residency is they want connectivity, they want accessibility, they want shelter, they want restrooms, they want recreation activities for all ages, including play for kids. They want habitat restoration and ecological focus. They want river access. The concerns, no matter what the residency is the water quality. So the river, there was a lot of concern about E. coli and the quality of the river. They wanted to make sure we're addressing flooding, that we can design this park to accommodate that, and avoiding an overall theme park feel. And then there was one little area where there was a variance between residencies. So based on Woodfin, whether in Woodfin or outside of Woodfin, this was the one thing that we noted is that those in Woodfin tend to lean more towards having a more passive park, a little bit more quiet park, and those outside of Woodfin wanted more activities. I get, mainly assuming people are traveling to this place, they want a little more experience.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to take it from here. I wanted to go through some of the design insights that we had from our trip to the NOC in mid-June. And we had a great trip. I think we as designers learned a lot and saw a lot of very important things to pay attention to in our design. And there's a handful of you guys that attended as well. And hopefully you got the same insights. Some of the main points that we took away are listed here. I'm going to run through them real quick. So overall, it's likely that only 1 out of 7 park users are there to actually get in the river. And that's something that was pretty apparent at the NOC. There's a lot of visitors to the site. Not everybody's there just to kayak. There's a lot of people that are watching, that are eating, that are traveling through. So that was an important point. Another thing that we understood was that we need to consider the fluctuations in the volume of visitors. So not only seasonally, summertime it may be really crowded, wintertime not as much, but also, with events and maybe school groups coming through. So there's always going to be a fluctuation of a lot of people to very few. And how do you keep the space activated? How do you make it so that high visitation areas are accessible for everybody still, and that they're safe and the flow works well as well. Restrooms and changing stalls, we understood those should probably be separated. Keeping those separated helps with some of those fluctuations in visitors, and having site visitors be separate from those that are using the river and needing to change and get in and out of the water. Food and restrooms are hugely important to the experience of the site, especially for those that are just visiting for the day or attending some sort of event. Having restrooms, as was noted in the survey, that is very important for many people to have that access, and then also food keeps people there. Another point is that play areas are important for kids. We noticed at the NOC there was a canopy net, and a lot of folks mentioned how awesome that was. And maybe something in that realm might fit better than having a pump track on the site, something for discussion later. But it is important to have that kind of activity for children, and that was also noted in this public survey. The site operator, in this case, it was the NOC, that helps avoid user conflict. They help control some of the spaces, whether it be challenging or not. Having somebody on site at all times helps it operate more smoothly. Circulation patterns and designated use areas help avoid conflicts. They have using one-way parking and things like that can help make things smoother with those fluctuations. And then another insight, maybe more for us, is the construction material considerations, with the river interface and protecting boats and equipment. Noticing material replacement, they had a lot of gravel there, and how they have to replace the gravel continuously. Some of those considerations we'll be going through as designers as we begin to work through the design elements. And also we had Amanda from the Corps of Engineers that came, and she did provide some input, and it's just important important to remember, safety and having some sort of bypass for users, for tubers, especially with regards to the wave, minimizing impact to the river. Those were points that really hit home that we'll keep in mind as we move through the design process. So it was overall a really great trip, and I think it was a worthwhile experience for all of us.
Great. So we're at the point of the meeting where we're really trying to have some dialogue with you all now. And so if we were in person, we'd probably be getting up, moving around a little bit, and but we're not going to be able to do that. So if you need to stand up wherever you are and shake it out a little bit, go for it. But we really want to get into some of the information and again, have a conversation with you guys. So please speak up. And Kim, do you have anything you want to add before we get into this?
I'd just like to mention that we want to try to make this as many people be able to comment as possible. So this is a bigger group. So if you feel like you want to say something, there's an option to say it through video or through commenting. We'll be monitoring the comments and sharing those when there's time for that. So we'll try to facilitate it so that there's enough comment from everyone, but we want this to be as many people providing input as possible.
Great. So are these the only folks left in the meeting? Okay, good. I'm only seeing a few people, so I was like, did we lose folks or is everyone still here? Okay, good. I'm seeing more faces now. Good. All right.
Cheryl had his hand up.
They might have.
Yeah, not being shy. I thought going back and trying to remember that restrooms were not a priority, if I remember correctly, based on one of the slides. Is that right? But that I just need to recount that because I noticed that, and then I saw that in all the surveys that restrooms were a priority, and I just wanted to make sure that I understood correctly that on an early slide on one of the designs or one of the items where the town and Equinox prioritize things based on budgets, that restrooms is not a priority. Is that correct?
No, restrooms are a priority, and I believe I think the presentation's off, but they are in the first phase.
Okay, good.
Yeah, they were prioritized. It was the parking, the upper pavilion, the restrooms, the access down to the river, and the wave itself.
But specifically, Gerald, you were looking at the layout. The restrooms that were de-emphasized are the existing restrooms, meaning no improvements to those, I believe, would be the interpretation. Right. Whereas, yes, there was changing rooms, restrooms were referenced elsewhere on the new part of the park, which was emphasized.
Thanks.
It's a good question. I noticed that too.
Good call, Eric. Yes. So so the restrooms on the main part, on the wave side part of the park, the new part of the park, were definitely emphasized. And then in addition to that, the master plan has a revamping of the existing restrooms on the existing park side, and those were pushed to phase 2.
Brian has his hand up too. Let's see what Brian has to say.
Yeah, I want to, before discussion, I'm just curious from Equinox, did you have any ahas when comparing the master plan to the current survey results? And, as far as recommendations associated with potential changes from the master plan to entering the next phase of design. And then I'm also interested decisions needed and kind of by when you're hoping to have decisions input from this group. And then what are your recommendations based on the data?
Great. Well, we will get it. So the recommendations, we have a series of recommendations for you today. And we're hoping that based on what we say, you give us the thumbs up, or you say we need to move that into the discussion category and not answer that today. So if you can answer it today, we're going to ask and we get everyone to be on the same page, then great. If not, then it'll move to things that we're going to ask for a discussion on. And the way we're proposing this is that within the next 30 days, that you all, whatever we can't address today, you guys have breakout groups and we tried to solicit input from specific stakeholders. And we'll get more into that at the end of the meeting as next steps. And then just from any aha moments, do you guys have anything that when you saw the survey results, there's something that was like, oh, I didn't expect that?
So the survey, the similar survey was put out, what was it, 6 months ago or so, when the master plan was first presented to the town, and there were maybe 45 respondents. We now have 672 respondents. But the overall survey results didn't change very much between the 45 and the 672. And so as we've been monitoring them, there were actually nothing that really surprised me personally about the survey results. The play we included, we knew that people were going to be excited about the Greenway, the restrooms and the play features, and those all definitely came up. I will say there's one thing that surprised me, and I don't know that it should have, but there was a high focus on ecological focus and habitat restoration, and that did surprise me a little bit, Brian. But the fact that the wave itself wasn't prioritized as high as that didn't surprise me as much. But the fact that goal of the park was prioritized as highly as the accessibility and connectivity of the park was surprising to me.
I think that that's great too, because it gives the town a lot of backing to continue to go after grants or in other ways invest in that.
I'm curious, do you think that the wave didn't come across as such a high priority because of the demographics that completed the survey?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. We can make some guesses on that, but I don't have anything concrete to be able to reflect on that. I do think
the demographics, as in like residency or income, or what demographics are you referring to?
Primarily age and income.
I mean, we weren't asking those types of questions, were we?
No,
did.
we
We
asked
got
age though, didn't we?
We did.
Oh,
We asked age. We don't have income.
Right.
I will say among residency, the wave was more popular among those outside of Buncombe County. Outside of Buncombe County. So we broke it into 3 groups, and the wave was the most popular among the group outside of Buncombe County. And so, you know, I can dig deeper and break it down by demographics for, you know, to get a greater insight on that.
Kennedy has a question.
And then we'll get to you, Lucy. Go ahead, Kennedy.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly ask, and I apologize if it's been said and I missed it. How many people completed this survey? Do we have like a rough number?
Yeah, 672 completed the survey. Of the 672, 289 were Woodfin residents.
Okay.
And we do have demographics by age, gender, and ethnicity/race.
Lucy, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question for Dane and Riley. Do you have any counts of the number of people who went to that facility that you showed us in Colorado? Annual visitors, or
I can probably find some information from you. I can talk to the town of Eagle, and we can try to get some information for you. You know, the Eagle one in particular is super popular because it services so many different users. So in the summer, it's totally clogged with tubers and fly fishermen when it's lower flows, and during runoff when it's higher, we get a lot of kayakers and river surfers there. And I think, like the findings showed from the visit to the Nanahail Outdoor Center, 1 in 7 people are actually there to use the wave, but it's a focal point for a lot of people on shore. It's a spectator sport. And I think that probably answers a little bit of the last question too, about why the wave priority was a little bit lower. Is probably the ones who are prioritizing the wave are the ones who are using the wave, but it will still be a a focal point. So I can find out some information for you on number of users, and we have a lot of other example projects that we definitely have data on that, so we can send that over as well.
Yeah, it would be really important for us to get a sense of numbers when we're thinking about parking.
Yeah, and the seasonality of that's kind of interesting too. Very curious about that for operations. It's great.
Yep.
Great.
Good note.
I have a second question too, and that is it possible to paddle from Asheville to Woodfin to the wave?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right, thanks.
Great, good questions. So let's get into, so we have, you can, I'm hoping you can all see the presentation again. And we have some recommendations on parking, open space versus developed areas with the Greenway, restrooms and changing facilities, and some of the additional amenities. And then for discussion, we think that we'll definitely want to talk to you, and this might continue after the meeting, phasing. You know, we developed a phased plan based on a budget that the town asked us to meet, but do we need to change that? And so that's a question. What is there anything else that needs to go in it or be pulled out? Use levels. So I think Lucy was just getting at that. How many users can we maybe anticipate at this location? River access, capacity, design of the river access itself, outfitters. There's been quite a good bit of discussion on that already. The wave design and user needs, and again, additional amenities. That's both in the recommendations and in the discussion column, and we'll get to that, and you'll see why in a second. But for parking, really, what we are suggesting is that we look at if we can get any additional parking under the existing DOT bridge, and if we can look at any potential overflow parking where the existing Riverside Park is currently located. We're not quite sure we're going to be able to do any of that. So our recommendation is that we follow the parking as developed in the master plan. So that's our recommendation. And so with that, the reasoning behind that, one is when we met at Nail Outdoor Center, Scott Shipley made the comment that the proposed parking that we're showing for the wave is more than what's typically provided for other wave projects. And so, we had quite a bit of discussion on the fact that we would quickly turn this park into a parking lot for access to the wave if we're not careful. And you can see from the survey results, the public wants a park and access to the wave. So it's a balancing act, and we feel like we've done a pretty good job of that. Some other things to consider is how outfitters might be accessing, unloading and loading up users that are kind of coming down the river. We should definitely be talking and having follow-up conversations about shared parking. There's parking all up and down this corridor. There's another park that's being developed. There's the train, there's the Greenway. So what other ways can people get to this park? And we think there's a number of ways, but that's part of like a longer term management plan for this whole corridor. Where will people park during events, things like that can be discussed later. And then, is there trailer parking needed for phase one? So that was a question that came up, because right now, phase one does not have a boat ramp in it, and phase one does not have the enhancement of the parking lot at the current Riverside Park, where we're talking about having parking for trailers. So that's something to consider.
David, folks are writing messages in here.
Great.
And I think maybe we continue to go through this, but after each discussion point, like at the end of the parking bullets, we'll have a conversation. And I just wanted to mention we are monitoring your comments, and we'll discuss at the end.
Well, we're at the end of the parking bullet. So if you want to,
Okay.
yeah.
Coral asked, do outfitters need a permit to use the park? Before we have a discussion on all this and that, we did want to mention what David said about management plan. There may need to eventually be a management plan or policy management stuff written up. So some of these things that come up may actually be a separate item, but we can help keep track of anything that's more policy or management related, so it can be addressed.
Yep, and we'll get more on with the outfitters because that was in the discussion column for sure. So anything else on parking? Do you guys how do you feel if we look at expanding the parking or overflow parking at current Riverside Park, and we come back to you and say, really, it's not feasible? Show of hands, who's, and you can even use the raised hand if you want to, or raise it. Who's okay with the parking as shown in the master plan? So no one is?
I don't know enough about it. How many spaces are there? And I'd really like to get a sense of how many people have used the other facilities that Dane and Riley have worked on before I could give you a good answer to that. But
I'd like to add too, oh, sorry. I live across the street in Mountain Living, and I frequent Riverside Park all the time. And if there's on a Sunday afternoon, it's not uncommon if someone's renting out the pavilion and a bunch of cyclists are using it as home base, you're going to have shoulder parking on the side. And so as a resident of that area, it's super concerning for me. I understand the need for the balance between parking lots and green space, and I agree with that. It's just it's tough. I hope that there's enough because I've already seen it at capacity on numerous occasions. And then I would also say, I want to also chime in and say talking about, you know, a crosswalk or something for pedestrians at Riverwalk and Mountain Living is going to be vital because people just fly there, and it's really kind of a scary area when there's a lot of cars clogging visibility.
And although
also, go ahead, Gerald.
Although I raised my hand that I was okay with the parking in the master plan, I agree with Lucy too, that before we can make an informed decision, we need information on how many people are parking, and not only how many people are parking, but how often the parking for these types of facilities is maximized, because building a huge parking lot for a few days a week, although I understand, I think Coral maybe, or maybe Darby about the shoulder parking and the overflow at Riverside Park. We just building parking for a few times a year or even a month seems excessive, and we need to look at other options, providing off-site parking and connectivity of some type, safe pedestrian connectivity between parking and areas and the park itself.
I might suggest that there be a committee or a breakout group that addresses overflow, and even consider if there could be MOUs with adjacent landowners, or there's mention of use of Craggy's line for events. So coming up with a policy and strategy how to address overflow if you all don't want to make sure that we're including event parking, because that often is really hard to accommodate for.
And I'll just throw in one thing is that the site also tells us how much parking we can have. We're going to be limited just based on what is even available for grade. So just throwing that out there as well.
Yeah, so even if you guys told us you wanted more parking, we might not be able to get you any more parking. That's because there's power line, high transmission power line easement going through there. There's MSD, their main line going through there. And so if we wanted to add to Riverside Park, we're not quite sure yet we could even fit anything in addition to that. So it's what does the property allow, and also what can you get? So if you guys tell us you want more parking, we can look at that, but we'll also let you know if we can't.
I think parking we talked about in phase 2, but that'll be important for, even if it's a temporary place for trailers to park, to load up after a trip.
Yeah.
Are you talking about discussing this in the phasing portion because it's in the master plan, but not in phase 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Have you considered maybe a gravel lot for overflow on the other side of 251?
The other side of 251.
Yeah, like off of Elk Mountain Road where the Beaver Dam Greenway will go up eventually.
Oh, across from MSD?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Not as part of this project. We have not, Lucy.
Okay.
How do you all feel about the idea of having a working committee or small group identifying off-site parking for events and coming up with a strategy? Because we are not necessarily scoped to do that. And that's something that I think would need to be coordinated with landowners and others. Eric, I think as a town, maybe if you have thoughts on that, especially.
Maybe that's something the project management subcommittee could be tasked with, at least for an initial stab, and then our committee could weigh in on that.
As a
So,
committee member, I'd be happy to work on that. Yeah.
great.
Okay.
So it sounds like parking, no recommendation will be approved today. So we'll kick that to the discussion, and that will be moved to a subcommittee or a breakout group to get together and try to get some answers to that. So we're going to move then to the next item that we had. If someone can, I can't move the laptop right now, which is the open space. We feel like there's good balance between open space and developed area on the park project. I don't know if you guys have studied it enough, but this was just a question that was just asked. Is there a good balance between open space and developed space? Do we need more open space? Do we need more developed space? And so we felt based on the survey results, getting that back and seeing some of the uses that people wanted in addition to the wave itself, that there was a decent balance. But we would definitely welcome your input on this one as well. So if you feel like this is a recommendation you can support, let us know. If not, again, this will get moved to the discussion category. Any thoughts on the open space, developed space? Y'all feel good about it?
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
So is this one that you feel comfortable accepting as a recommendation from us?
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay.
Do you want us to vote on these, David?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's why I'm asking. Because then we know if there's enough support now, then we know it's one less thing that we have to push off and try to make a decision on within the next 30 days. We can focus on those things that we can't, that's going to need more time and more stakeholder involvement and input.
Do you want us to vote on them going down the list after you go through them and we have discussion, or at the end of each one?
No, at the end of each one, let's have discussion right now, and then I'll ask if you guys, is there a way to that you've been doing this through the town or the city when you vote on things, that you have a certain process? Do you actually show of hands, or do you do it through chat, or how do you record a vote?
It's been the affirmative on aye. It's been ayes and nays.
Okay.
We've only had one or two of those, I think, come from this committee. Correct me if I'm wrong, y'all.
So
no, we've only had a couple. Virtually, it's a little tricky because we can't see each other saying aye and nay. But so I usually start off with any nays because they usually are quicker, quicker to weed out. It might be easier if we go through each one of your topics and then go back to the list to vote at the end.
Okay.
Can I circle? Go ahead.
Question. So
yes,
if we approve the open space, I mean, I guess I'm curious, like, would there ever be a need potentially, like if the parking recommendation is to grow the parking, to add more, would we encroach upon some of that open space? I guess that's my only hesitation in I mean, I definitely want as much open space as possible, but that would be my one hesitation in approving it right now is.
I think we could approve it now, and then if there is a need for additional parking, and the only place that would be available would be the park, and that would encroach on the open space, we could vote to amend the plan. That way we can move forward.
So in addition to that, Carol, what we're really trying to do, we're going to, based on the survey results and this input and then the future stakeholder input, we're going to develop a site plan, and we're calling that like our final site plan. But before it's finalized and we take it to the town of Woodfin, we're going to bring it back to you all. And so at that point, you will have another opportunity to say, well, what if we did this, or what if we make a change here or there? So just because you are voting for it now does not mean that this is the one and only time you're going to be seeing the plan or having opportunity for comment and feedback.
Okay.
I'd like to circle back on some of the messages about parking. So Eric mentioned that the town is having ongoing discussions with property owners and alternate uses for parking. So I think if that informs how many spaces could be allowed for event parking, that can inform what's needed on site. So Eric, do you feel that having a separate committee working group would be helpful, or do you feel like that's covered through your work?
I think it's covered largely through our work. That is going to be part of the task of the project manager when that person comes on board too, is operationalizing afterwards, but also considering parking. Parking was one of the big scary points for me of visiting NOC. So we do have a project management subcommittee who is also looking at some of this type of work. And so, Brian, do you think that falls within the scope of what your committee is already looking at and discussing?
Yeah, I think it's something we can definitely help facilitate and orchestrate. And will tonight's meeting, will that help inform this as well? The public input meeting or the meeting with the property owners?
No. The purpose of that meeting is not to talk about parking. It's Greenways is the main focus of those meetings that we're having. But I think from those meetings, though, we are having some follow-up conversations. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
Yep. Outside of the formal meeting space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think anything in addition to the master plan would be a bonus. You know, if we do vote on the greenway versus the open space versus the developed space, and we're good with that, but with the intent that some of the open spaces can serve multifunctional, parking during a larger event. I don't see a need to hold up the voting process necessarily. I personally think the master plan looks good as long as we can kind of earmark some of that open space for special event parking and serve in a
And again, Brian, we are going to look at expanding, that option of having event parking on the existing side, and then under the bridge on the new side, and see if those are even options because of the site constraints. And then we can present those to you if they are actually an option. But it may very well be that the site may not accommodate much additional parking.
Well, I think then the conversation is primarily around, where are the overflow parking opportunities instead of, looking within the current master plan for additional parking. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. From our perspective, yes, we believe that's probably the optimal route. Yeah.
Okay. So having said that, yes, I think that's definitely something that we can help with from a subcommittee standpoint, as well as, support the PM in their role with making sure that they cover, we cover those bases.
One other topic that we can loop into another conversation is the idea of permitting for outfitters, or if it's needed. Coral and Chris were having a conversation about that through messaging. I did want to mention that in some other work we were doing for the city of Asheville, there was discussion about the outfitters creating some kind of coalition to interface with the city, because the city was also considering at some point doing fees for any of their river access areas. And Lucy, I don't know if you have any more ideas about that, but I do think that, you know, if we are going to bring in stakeholders like outfitters in conversations, that could be something that we talk to them about on their opinions of that.
That's not a bad idea. My opinion about that is we should take a serious look at that, because fees could help pay for the maintenance and upkeep of the area, or possibly pay for a ranger who will help with user conflicts.
And I agree, and I speak maybe from a different perspective as a taxpayer in the town of Woodfin. If my money is going to develop the park as a public place and there are private enterprises making money from that, then they need to contribute to the upkeep and the maintenance.
All right.
So we're now on to the next topic, which is width of Greenway.
So one of the things that we kind of heard, and one of the things that we kind of reevaluated with the existing master plan, is that there's going to be a lot of potential for user conflicts, and one of the ways to help address that and to get people moving through the space is to have a wider greenway. Typically, greenways are the county is looking for the greenway along Highway 251, which is this French Broad River corridor, to be around 10 feet, which we might even suggest that they try to make it 12 feet. But for this section going through the park, especially in the entrance plaza area, we're suggesting we make it as wide as 14 feet. And then we kind of taper it down to 12 feet as we get further into the property and away from some of the higher use areas. So that's one of our recommendations. And that's something that we're thinking could be helpful to the project.
Do we want to discuss that, or just discuss once we go on to the vote? Any thoughts on that?
Any thoughts on that? Let's discuss it now.
I'm wondering if there's been any consideration to bicycle traffic through the park, and if there is expectation that once completed, the Greenway would serve as a place to get bikers off of 251.
So
yep.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you can anticipate families with children are going to not want to be along the road. But if you have the expert bike rider that is trying to go for long distance, they probably will still stay on the road and not get on the Greenway when there's a lot of people here. They might get off of it when it's quiet. So I think you can expect that families and people that are not as comfortable riding their bikes in traffic on Riverside Drive, on one of those, would want to get onto the Greenway.
So yeah, and I think in this case, with the way we have the Greenway laid out, and we're not going to be able to accommodate high speed traffic of bikes with the radii that are available. They're going to have to slow down. So it might be a little bit different.
We haven't gone into this detail in the master plan, but striping can also help with user conflict, at least where there's really heavy use.
We do that at intersections.
Well, Lucy can probably speak more to this than I can, but as a user of the Wilma Dykeman Greenway, even though there's a buffered bike lane, which is a fantastic thing, and I know that took a lot of negotiating and talking with DOT and other entities on that, there's still a lot of people using skateboards, roller skates, and bikes on the Greenway, and it's really annoying as somebody who's running or walking on it. And so if there is a way for us to engage DOT, I don't think there's any plans to do anything to Riverside Drive anytime soon, but to have any of those conversations, if there is a possibility that we could get a buffered bike lane on there, I think that it would be a tremendous thing for this project and just for Woodfin in general. The only comment I have about increasing from 12 to 14 is just the increased cost that has. I just don't know in terms of budget with Buncombe County that, what discussions would need to happen to make any sort of overage at this point. I know that there's already an overage, and hopefully some American Rescue Plan funds will fill that gap. But I just don't know if that would push it even more so into an overage that might not be able to be filled.
From my perspective, the Wilma Dykeman Greenway is already too narrow for our users. And so these widths are probably the adequate width. I do understand Chris's concern about cost overages, but man, there's nothing more frustrating than having a brand new greenway that's already too skinny.
And Lucy, from the work that we're doing with you on the Greenway ADA transition plan and pedestrian plan for the city right now, I believe that the North Rad Tip Greenway or the French Broad Greenway is proposed to be 14, or that's how it is right now. So just wanted to add that into you at some point. It would maybe narrow back down, but at least the city is planning for that. Currently, is that a correct statement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is a situation where 10 feet will feel too small for the potential level of users that will be out here. So yeah, it is an additional cost, but like Lucy was getting at, it's a shame if you build something that is too small to start with.
Do we want to move on, or is there any other discussion on that? Good. Okay.
All right. Restrooms and changing facilities. So this was a big one. Where when we were at Nantahala Outdoor Center and we were talking to some of the paddlers, it was pretty apparent to us that there was a benefit to have restrooms separate from the changing areas. First of all, you don't have to have as big of a facility in one location, and it just was a little bit more convenient for the folks that just wanted to get out of their wet gear, get into some dry clothes, and move on. So we didn't see any issues with breaking those out, and so that's a recommendation that we have for the project. Any discussion on that?
Just, I think it's a good idea. We have just some quick breakdown of the budget impacts of having them separate and combined.
I never would have considered it. I think that sounds like a good idea, I guess, if that's what you found out from the NOC tour.
Yeah, it also keeps, think about all the water that's coming into the restrooms for folks to get into the changing room. And then you go to the restroom area and the floor's all wet. It kind of just makes you feel kind of uncomfortable. So it's a way to keep things a little bit more clean and that comfort that folks were looking for with the restrooms, because we know there's going to be concern over the cleanliness of the restrooms to begin with. So,
and the changing facilities we saw examples of in Durango are a little more open air, and so they don't get as stuffy as if it was kind of grouped in with the restroom.
It can be fairly low cost, right?
Yeah,
and it can be fairly low cost.
Right.
We're talking wood and corrugated metal roof, and yeah.
Even if you have a roof.
Even if you have a roof, yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think it's really important as well to keep them separate. I've been married to a kayaker for 25 years, and I can tell you they like to just change next to their car.
Yeah.
And we don't want the Woodfin police called every other day. So I think that's key.
Yeah. That's right. That's exactly what the paddlers told us. Like, we'll just change our car. That's fine. We're like, no.
All right. Should we move on?
Yeah. So then the next one for recommendations actually has, because it shows up in both categories with recommendations and for discussion. But some of the things from the amenities, now this comes from the survey. And so these, the list on the left, the recommendations ones are the things that we think are worth adding, or they're already included in the master plan. So education's already included. We have interpretive signage that we plan to include, a beach area with water play for kids. We see that that's something that, you know, in the Durango example that we looked at was really popular. Nature playground, that was something that folks really wanted play structures for their kids. And so, you know, it could be something very simple. We were talking in the office today that it could just be, you know, we have a grade change, and on that slope, we could just put boulders that the kids could scatter up and have a little slide that they can come down. So I think there's some cost-effective things that you could do that wouldn't add a lot, but could actually provide another recreational use, especially for kids. The training platform's already included. So depending on how that goes with the training platform that's going to Silverline, maybe there's a continuation of that, maybe not. But for now, we think it's worth keeping. Seating near the wave, we already have. Changing stalls for clean restrooms, we just talked about that. So a new one would be boat storage. There could be a good opportunity for folks to have some boat storage on premise, and grills, because people might want to linger a little bit and cook out. And so we thought those were good additional amenities. We'd like to talk about those to see what your thoughts are on the ones that we're recommending, or the ones that are already included versus the ones that we have in the discussions column. Any thoughts on any of these?
I'm trying to be polite and not be the first person to raise my hand like that kid in class.
Yeah.
I like the incorporated nature play down to the beach.
Right.
Incorporating the climbing aspects. I've been to some of those parks out west that have bouldering features just scattered around the parking lot area, and it's a nice place to linger and hang out and let the children be occupied while you're doing other things.
Great.
I also like that idea, but I'm wondering if we need to provide an ADA play area too, just a thing that's more accessible. I like the idea a lot of having lighting. The boat storage seems really interesting to me, but I know living near Beaver Lake that it can take up every square inch of additional space. And so we would need to be really careful about how that would fit into the master plan, but also how to manage that from the town's perspective. And I love the idea of grills. I don't think we have enough grills in this county.
The
Agreed.
boat storage seems to work at Beaver Lake because it's the same, you go out and you come back in, but in this situation, I would expect that if the wave is something where you would put in and take off at the same place, but I kind of think for the average user in Woodfin or Buncombe County, you're going to be, put in upriver and take out downriver, and boat storage is not as important when you're not putting in and out in the same place.
Yeah. And I love, go ahead, Coral.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think we'll see a lot of park and play people. So I think the boat storage could be interesting and maybe another revenue stream for the town. And then I like the idea of night lights and lighting as well. I was just curious. I know that there's signage right now at the park that's closed after a certain time, or do we have any concerns with people like going in there late at night? And I mean, I guess you get on the wave at your own risk, or play at your own risk.
Yeah, I think we were thinking with the lights really to light up the Greenway and then the plaza area, because we have some grade changes and some stairs, and we wouldn't want someone to be coming in through this space at night and then like having an accident, and not because they couldn't see well enough that there was a step or a railing or something like that. So I don't know if we were thinking like all the way down to the river access area, but still, I think people.
Well, that's what that particular commenter, I think the nightlights was referring to, lighting up for the wave.
Oh, was just for the wave itself?
Oh,
Maybe not lighting the wave, but lighting up for that river access area.
Oh, that's what I was talking about, like the whole plaza area.
Yeah.
But not the
water.
Yeah, some nice mood lighting.
Yeah.
No lights.
Some underwater, pool lighting.
Yeah.
Pool lighting.
Yeah. I'm sure Riley and Dave could work that out for us.
Wanted to mention on the boat storage that, if that's something that's desired, then the designers will look at if it can accommodate that, because it does take up a lot of space. But I also think it's an option for adjacent landowners to provide for a fee. So, you know, the Mills of Riverside already have some boat storage. Would they be interested in providing more for a fee? So it could also be an opportunity to partner with adjacent landowners.
Yeah.
I agree with all the recommendations. The boat storage sounds like we need to have further discussion on and isn't necessarily a priority for phase one.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that any of these necessarily get moved into phase one if they're not already in it, but sounds like boat storage maybe is the one that we need to put over into the for discussion column of the amenities. Would you all agree with that? Potentially? Okay. So we'll slide that one over and then we'll come back to these. So we're really at the end of the recommendation component. So I don't know if we can go back to the slide that had the recommendations and discussions column. Yep, that was it right there. So it sounds like now, like, is there anything that sounds like we were suggesting now we go back and we look at voting for any of these recommendations or not. So sounds like parking definitely needs to be moved into the discussion column. But you tell me, I don't think that we need to vote on that because I think we heard enough that there needs to be additional conversation. Amount of open space versus developed space in the plan is shown in the master plan. Do you guys want to vote on that? And a yay or a nay? How about
any nays?
Any nays? Okay. Okay. The width of the greenway through the park. Any nays on that? Okay. The restroom and changing facilities. Any nays
on separating those?
And the additional amenities. Let's go to the amenity slide again with the ones, everything but the boat storage. Do you guys feel that all of these amenities on the recommendations column, except for the paid boat storage, that we would slide into the for future discussions column? Do you support those? Whether they go into phase one or phase two, we don't have to decide that now, but
right.
We would just like to know if that would need to be added to the overall plan. So I think
a way to ask that could be, in addition to pay boat storage, is there any item from that list that anyone would like to add to the move to discussion?
Not for me, but I am curious, what are the numbers next to the items?
That was a number of respondents who added it to the free response.
Okay.
Good question, Lucy.
Here's a question for the commission. Do we want to move the pay boat storage off of the recommendation list, or is it that we just want to carefully plan with future discussions how to do it?
It seems to me having some discussion of how that would actually be operated from a policy management perspective would be needed before it's planned for. I mean, perhaps we need to look first to see if we can accommodate it in the design. And then if we can't, or if we can,
we have
then
room.
We do. Okay.
Yeah, there's room for it.
Okay, well, from my thinking is if there is room for it, we should probably earmark that area for boat storage, but we do need to think carefully how that'll be managed. But at the same time, those clean restrooms, we also have to figure out how to manage those.
Right, absolutely.
So, my idea, I'm speaking to the commission members, would be to keep this list of recommendations as it is and not move anything off of it, and continue to be concerned with this list. Does anyone agree or disagree with that?
I agree with that. I think that as this evolves and moves forward, we'll be informed by the public as to what's viable or not. If we are going to have somebody manage it, then there's going to have to be a revenue stream that comes through. And renting boats or storing boats seems like a way to do some cost recovery with it. So I would, definitely keep it sort of in the back of the mind for the moment.
Okay, so what we're hearing is keep this as a consideration and look at a way to potentially add it to the plan. Even though we're not sure if it goes into phase 1 or phase 2, but at least it's kind of being considered at this point in the process.
Earmark a spot for it.
Yep. Okay. So if you guys all feel good with that, would you be willing to, can I ask for a vote on that? If there's any nays on that? Oh, go ahead, Ann.
I do support the list, but when Lucy said bikes just a second ago on accident, I thought, are there bike racks understood to be a part of this, or is that something to add?
That's a great question. So I'm not 100% positive that there are bike racks on the master plan. However, we have had internal discussions that bike racks are a must.
Yeah.
And they didn't make it in the public survey at all, but it is in our mind.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can we add it to the recommendations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can add it.
Yes.
Yes.
There you go. So we're adding bike racks. I like that because this is a great place. This is going to be a trailhead for the Greenway anyway. And so I think that makes complete sense to have that here. People will ride their bikes, park, spend the day here, get on a boat, have fun.
Did you add it to that one or?
I just wrote it down.
I wrote it down. All right.
Great.
I wrote it down.
Great. So any other discussion?
I just, for our voting, I just want to be clear that we as a commission have approved all of the items of discussion with the exception of parking. Correct?
That's what.
Correct.
Okay.
Great.
If anyone disagrees with that vote, please say so now. Otherwise, we'll be considering it a unanimous vote. It's unanimous.
Great. Awesome.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right. So let's move to the next one. So these are, so I color coded everything in blue was recommendations. Everything in green is a point for discussion. And so we're at 4:37. I don't know if you want us to go to 5 or not, because you might have other business. So we have about, I think, 4 or 5 items that we just wanted to put out there. And maybe what I'm thinking of is if we can just kind of share with you kind of what we're thinking, like why these are discussion points and why we're not at a place where we're like coming to you with a recommendation. Maybe we just go through them really quickly, and then we can see what time's left and maybe tell you our plan for next steps on how to work towards getting some answers to these discussion points. Does that work for you all? Okay. All right. So let's start with phasing then. So phasing, really, we want to look at what amenities should be included in phase 1, and is there anything that should potentially be moved to phase 2? So again, we did an original phasing plan, but this is the time where do we have a temporary area for trailers, for example, to pick up boaters or things like that? So those are some things that we want to ask. What are some additional low-cost amenities based on the public survey that should be considered to be included in phase 1? What does the fundraising forecast suggest for phase 1? And if there are certain things like a pump track or the nature play area where they could get funded separately and maybe even built separately, would the town want to consider that? Are there partners that we could look at to actually help build this? For example, with the pump track, there could be Asheville on Bikes or some other groups that might be interested in supporting that. So these are some of the questions, and we'll just run through because I think it's important for you, and you probably will have additional thoughts and questions, but these were some of the top ones that we had. So we'll go to the next slide after phasing. Oh, this is the phase plan. So
So just a quick overview. The phase 1 currently as is with the budget that was provided is pretty bare bones. It's the restroom, it's the pavilion, it's the access, the greenway, and the wave,
And the parking.
and the parking.
And this plan kind of shows what's in phase one. Okay, and then we had a lot of discussion on use levels, the river access. You know, do we have enough places for people to get into the river? Are there going to be several points of user conflicts because there's going to be so many different users? How are we going to get the people through from the greenway through the space in a way that's not going to conflict with the boaters? So there's lots of questions regarding that, and I think that some of these can be addressed through design. And some of them we are thinking that we should just anticipate that this, if the vision of a premier wave is fulfilled and actually constructed in accordance with that vision, then this will be a very successful and highly used corridor for not just the water sports, but also for the greenway. So we have to plan for that. And so a lot of these questions are kind of getting at that, and also getting at, you know, how big should the ramp, the boat ramp be? That's some, and how our outfitters going to use the space to pick up people and drop them off. And so we kind of addressed that a little bit before as well. So, and then should any of the user groups be prioritized over any of the other, or should the results of the public survey really dictate that? And so that's something, because sometimes we're getting a little bit more feedback from one user group maybe than another. Or do we just weigh the survey and we just go with what the survey tells us? And so that's kind of a big question, because at some point we're going to have to make some decisions. And the decisions we make, again, should all go back to the vision and goals. So that very first slide, if there's additional amenities or different things that should be included or excluded in phase one, if they don't fit that vision, and actually, frankly, they probably shouldn't be on the plan if they don't fit the vision and goals to begin with. But that's just kind of the test that we always have to use when we're making any decisions on this. And so we'll reiterate that again when we talk with the stakeholders as well. And then the next slide is outfitters. How are we going to work with outfitters? What does the town want to do? Do they want to sell permits? Do you want to let one outfitter on site? There's lots of different questions around the outfitters and how that could work. And then also with food, will there be concessions? And if so, we need to know that, because then we need to provide a space for concessions. Because right now we do not have a concession stand in the design. Or are we looking at something where we provide the space for food trucks to show up on site and provide food for folks during events? So those are some kind of big picture programming questions.
So yeah, so from a design perspective, we're really looking for you to provide feedback. Do we want to just provide the space for something in the future? Do we need to provide a building? Is there a new building that needs to be put in? Or, you know, what does the space look like? Right now we could accommodate like a shaved ice cart, right? But could we accommodate a food truck? I'm not quite sure yet. So those are the kinds of questions we would want answered from you.
I would also like to add that, you know, choosing a food truck or an outfitter to work exclusively in this park is a whole chore in itself, and something that the town's council would need to weigh in on. And it's more complicated than it sounds. The city of Asheville does not allow food trucks in our parks for that reason. So yeah, and if you were to pick one outfitter to use that, you could be very well sure that you're going to hear a lot of other outfitters complaining about it. So it's something that needs to be very carefully thought through.
Lucy, other than the baseball fields in the city, I know they have concession stands, and I know that Buncombe County Sports Park has one. Are there any other parks that have concession stands?
And not that I can think of, none in Asheville. Maybe Black Mountain might have one, but I don't know. Chris, maybe you might know.
The only two in the Buncombe County system are Charles D. Owen and Buncombe County Sports Park, just because of the type that they are. We do allow food trucks in Lake Julian, but that's a fairly new thing. I believe that at the ball fields, and also our North Asheville sports complex also has one. That's pretty old and run down. I think that Black Mountain does have one at their ball field. So
Yeah.
And they're only open for events.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're only open whenever there's events that are going on. And I know with ours, they're pretty run down. They're probably like 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I could throw out that the city of Knoxville allows for food trucks for some of their parks, as well as outfitters to lease access to some of their areas. So there's some other models available that we could share or connect the town with if needed.
And some of these, like the outfitters, like we probably just need to know, yes, we're gonna have outfitters coming in with trailers to pick up boaters, which we're anticipating already. And that's why we have a boat ramp in phase 2 where the current Riverside Park is, and trailer parking. But that kind of question is getting to the management and the policy. And that doesn't have to be decided right now for us to be able to move forward with 30% design, getting that site plan. But these are the food for sure, because if we do have a concession stand, we need to know that now, sooner than later, we're in that 30% design phase. So some of these will be program elements that impact the site, like Jason had mentioned, and then some of them will be more management and policy decisions that the town will get to make over time. So then there's a whole list of questions regarding the wave. And I could read these. I'd have to read these questions off that came up because I'm not technically, I don't know what a rock drop is, but that was recommended, non-mechanical, we know that, but is there a specific focus on the shape of the wave? What range of flows? And I think Riley actually addressed some of that today a little bit. So there's a whole list of questions, and we thought that would really be good to have a stakeholder group where S2O is involved, and one or a few of you as well, that we kind of bring together some folks and really try to get some answers to some of these questions, because I think this is important for them to be able to do the design for the wave.
One thing that might make sense is that we aggregate these questions in with this question and anything else that users and outfitters might be able to weigh in on. So if we could get them together and talk about how they've seen this elsewhere or what would work well for them, then we could address those by people who are technical experts and really have a lot of idea behind that.
And then the last one is the amenities, and it's now looking at the column for discussion. So the concessions, outdoor showers. So when we were at Nana Outdoor Center, NOC, there was discussion about having like a wash-off area just for your feet. And there was discussion on showers. And there were a few folks with a survey that did ask for showers. I thought there were 3. Even though the 3's not showing up here. Rental lockers, we just felt like if you're starting to get some of those amenities in, it's starting to feel a little bit more developed specifically for the wave. And not that that's a bad thing, but do you really need lockers? Yes, it would be nice maybe. And so that's why we're not saying yes or no. It's up for discussion and for you guys to weigh in. The pump track was definitely, that got 3 votes, but there's been some folks that really want the pump track and others that really don't. Body weight workout stations. We got 4 folks that wanted to see those incorporated. And so that would be like using your own body weight along the trail. They have the little exercise stations you've probably seen in the past. They kind of have a modern version of those that are a little bit nicer. And then boat rentals. Do you want to actually have any boat rentals on site? We know the Knoxville Urban Wilderness, they have these quarries and you can go there and rent a stand-up paddleboard and take it out. Do you guys want to get into that business of having that option? Or do you want to just let that be for the outfitters? So those are some things for discussion. And so all these items that we just brought up, we're not ready and we don't have the time today to get answers to, but we need to start thinking about these. And the best way we feel like we could get these answers is to have you guys help us develop breakout sessions, find the right stakeholders to invite to these conversations and start to have those conversations.
And so what we're thinking is, with your help, at least getting 1 or 2 or more of you to these meetings, we try to do that within the next month. We think it can be very informal. We could do it at a brewery, at a coffee shop, outdoors somewhere. But trying to get some key stakeholders around some of these topics to help us resolve some of the questions we might have. So one thought is that we do have the Whitewater Outfitter focus group to resolve some of these questions. I think a couple other of the topics that we would like to address, let's go back to those. Is there any stakeholders that could shed light on some of these amenities and actually maybe help fund some of them? So like the nature play area or the pump track, are there stakeholders around that might be able to help in funding or facilitate what that might look like? Any other thoughts on another focus group or stakeholders that you might want to engage?
Parking, definitely need to have a group that will help us resolve the parking issue, just how to address the parking.
And it sounds like from Eric that he will be addressing that with landowners, but if we want to do a follow-up group to that, or we can always, the outfitter and river access focus group could help us provide some ideas that they've seen elsewhere.
It is sounding like that is mostly an off-site
It's mostly off-site, yeah.
decision though, right?
The parking?
Yeah.
So any other thoughts besides kind of the outfitter, Whitewater access focus group? Any other thoughts on a meeting we might need to have with stakeholders to resolve some of these questions?
Yes, I think it would be good to have stakeholders weigh in on them. I can't think of anything else. By the way, it's about 8 till 5, and I believe we're going to need to end at 5 because Eric's got a meeting at 5:30. So, yes, let's expedite the rest of this, and the rest of our agenda is just going to have to wait till next month.
I just want to throw out one group that might be good is understanding the user fluctuations and what other outfitters along the French Broad River corridor are experiencing with use. If there's a group that would want to meet and meet with outfitters and understand how many users are using that, gather numbers or data, something like that could be helpful too.
So go ahead.
We can help facilitate organizing this meeting. We would want your thoughts and recommendations on who attends, but we will help move that next step forward.
So we'll probably get up with Eric and Adrian and have that next conversation shortly so we could start that process. So with that, Eric, did I say something? You okay there?
No, I'm okay there. I was thinking a lot of people don't just necessarily think on the spur of the moment, and so
Right.
it's time to process. And so I think some summary from this conversation, and those stakeholder groups in particular, might then be apparent to some folks who may be missing and could help this committee.
And we can definitely make recommendations on like stakeholders we're thinking could be good, and we'll just pass that along. And then if we can work with the town and the advisory committee to kind of pull those people together, I think that'd be great. So Lucy, we're done. We're at the end of our presentation. So, I mean, we didn't get into a lot of the discussion points, but at least you kind of know what they are. And I guess my last question before we kind of stop is if you could send us any other key discussion points that you think we're missing. Like we talked about some of the recommendations, we're good. We know we're moving the parking over to further discussion, but other things that need to be addressed that we could either address with you all, with, God bless you, with the design team, or if it needs to be a stakeholder led effort. So if you can let us know if you have any of those thoughts and maybe send those all to Eric, and then Eric, you could send them to us. that'd be great. And if you could do that in pretty soon here, within the next day or two, that would be great.
Okay. Commission members, I would like to say, I think the best way for us to move forward with this information in our list of approved, what are they called? Recommendations, is to create a letter for Walt to present to the board, the council of the town. And if I could get a copy of this presentation, I would be willing to draft the letter so that Walt can take it.
Great. Yes, you can get it.
Okay.
We'll update it too.
All right.
For Equinox, it would be helpful to, when you update it or separately, to have what specific questions you have left that we didn't resolve today, a timeline associated with those questions, whether it's pre-phase 1, phase 2, and then list of your recommended breakout groups or sessions. And that for my, did I hear correctly that Equinox is going to facilitate that?
Yes.
That all sounds good, Brian. I think that's good. We'll get on that and we'll provide those. And those questions will be some of these will be in the slides themselves that we kind of touched on.
Yeah, it would be helpful if they were consolidated as well, as far as the leftover, the questions that still need decisions made, and then timelines for the decisions, and then how do we address the gap? How do we, what breakout session and subject matter expert will help us get there.
Right.
Okay. Well, any other comments? Equinox, I'd like to thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Dane and Riley too, thank you very much for being here. This was very informative.
Yes, thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
All right, so we'll gather information, and then Adrian and or I will forward that to the commission, to the committee following this meeting as soon as we get that from Equinox. And then we'll go from there.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I think we're wrapping up the meeting and adjourning at 4:58.
Is the meeting
Good
at
job,
the
Lucy.
town hall at 5:30 something that some of us should be there for?
So the letters went out to all property owners that are adjacent to the Greenway, the future Greenway. So Highway 251 and Beaver Dam, all of them were invited, and a couple of business operators also. Just specific interest topics that are specific to their interests. And so, no, don't need to come. Wasn't an expectation that you would come. It was really for those folks. And so Equinox, but the lead design is HNTB, are leading that discussion, answering questions, responding to those questions. Buncombe County is here. So we held one yesterday. The second one and final one right now is this afternoon. And then there'll be more public input further on into the design process on the greenways.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Before we adjourn here, do we have, can we just finalize the day time for our next meeting?
So I think the committee last time landed on the second, what's today, Wednesday of each month.
Okay.
At 3 p.m. Adrian, is that your recollection? Yep, Anne says yes.
And are we gonna do it via Zoom, or do we want to try to meet in person next time?
That was one of the questions on the agenda that we didn't get to.
Right. Maybe just for simplicity, we should meet on Zoom one more time and put that closer on the top of the agenda next month.
Okay, sounds good. Thank
That's
you.
called keeping the can, y'all. We're gonna do that.
Yep.
Sounds good. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Yeah.
Here.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.